Hi, my name is Matt Archambault. I'd like to welcome you to my third DVD, which is titled How to Draw the Hand and Foot a Layered Approach. For those of you who haven't watched any of my previous DVDs, I've been an illustrator since roughly 1990, and I've also been teaching at the School of Visual Arts since 1997. How I've decided to work this DVD is I've decided to divide it into two different parts. The first part is going to be all about how to draw the foot in my layered approach, which would be the planes, the angles, light and shade, and some anatomy. And then I'm going to repeat that process with the hand. So stick with me through the anatomy part and you'll be up and running in no time. So let's get started with the first technique. All right, our first chapter in the foot section of this DVD, I want to talk about some strategic landmarks of bones that I think are very helpful to understand. Now, as I explained in the introduction, this DVD is not about anatomy. There's way too much anatomy to understand, and I'm not going to be able to fit it in a 2-hour DVD. And remember, I want to give you what is going to make your drawings improve immediately. So understanding every single bone and muscle is not going to do that, but understanding a few strategic ones will. All right, so what you want to understand first is this fibula that comes from the outside of the knee to the outside of the ankle. And the outside of the ankle here is going to be like a little bit lower than the tibia, which is going to be a little bit higher. This ankle, we're just going to call it an ankle because that's a common word for it. But it is the tibia that comes down. And if you just remember the inside is higher than the outside, that's something that's going to help your drawings. And then with the metatarsals over here, you just want to know where they're going to be like really on the edge of the foot. And they're going to give you a wonderful opportunity to wrap some lines in and around, some nice convex lines. That's how when I'm thinking about the bones, it's primarily on the top of the foot. That's where you really see them. That's where the skin is going to be like a little bit thinner. Underneath the foot, there's a lot more muscle and there's a lot more fat padding underneath the foot. So just understanding that these metatarsals are going to give you an opportunity to wrap in. Now, if we zoom on down to this foot down here, this is your end game, okay? But all these like lines that you put down on the paper, or that I'm putting down on the paper, the lines are the strategic like locations that I've talked about, like right over here with the tibia, the inside ankle. So that's where I'm rolling a convex line in. And then I got like a couple of like little lines over here that are indicating the heel bone. Like these lines are on the plane shift from the back of the heel to the side of the heel. Okay, so that's like really important. That's what I mean about strategic locations. This like little bump over here is also part of like your heel bone, and it's just going to make that skin, the contour of that skin, protrude out. Same thing, these lines that wrap around this cuneiform over here, strategic bone locations. I think it's important that maybe you go out and you buy an anatomy book and every once in a while look at it. I'm not saying that you need to know every single bone. It does help. I will say, if you're trying to do a realistic type figure drawing, the bones and the muscles and your understanding of where they're located in the body is going to help you, but it's not the most important thing, because all the techniques that we're going to dive into next after I talk about the muscles will really be able to get you to draw the foot and the hand in a very competent way. But I just want to show you at home where I use these strategic locations on this end game foot down here to kind of like wrap around, like this flange over here where this metatarsal meets the flange. Like I'm wrapping around, and that's going to be a good place to show the viewer, what is underneath the skin. So your figure drawings and, the hand and the foot do not look like they're made out of rubber. And same thing now, if we look at this like little drawing, you can see the flanges down here, how this is what I'm talking about on the top of the foot. You're really going to see the bone that would like wrap in. This would wrap into like a little fold. This is going to like wrap in a little bit over here. This is really pushing down, like from this bone to the bottom of the contour of the foot, there'd be like a little fat pad down over here. And same thing over here. There'd be you got to leave like a little space between the edge of the bone and the edge of the contour. Some of the bones are going to be like right on the edge, like I said, primarily on the top of the foot. Bottom of the foot, there's like that space. There's that like little cushion that your foot has. And then if we look at this foot over here, same type of thing. Fibula on the outside of the ankle. is really going to protrude out, is going to be lower than the inside of the ankle, and then this metatarsal, this outside, is really going to push out that foot. So like a couple of these strategic locations like I talk about, if you understand a few of them, boy, they're really going to go a long way for you. And you know, even over here, you're going to get like I'm going to talk about the gesture of the foot as we move on. This is going to give you like a nice area to promote this roundness of the foot, because I think a lot of people that draw the foot just make it so flat, and it's not flat. It's kind of like really round over here. So just understand minimal muscle and bone goes a long way for your drawings, okay? So I would say in your own time, go out and get a book on anatomy. We've talked about the bones, and now I want to talk about a couple of strategic muscles or tendons that I think that you should be aware of. These extensor tendons that are coming on down to each individual foot, each individual toe they're coming down towards. You know, if someone's like kind of lifting their foot up slightly, they're really going to kind of be pronounced. Not major that you understand them, but I wanted to point them out because they kind of do show up on the top of the foot. This right over here, this Achilles tendon that coming back down your leg, the back of your leg attaching to your heel, I think that's one that you should be aware of. The Achilles tendon, everyone's kind of aware of it anyway. And then you're really going to be seeing these extensors on the top of the foot. Same thing over there. On the inside of like your lower leg is pretty much, you know, all bone anyway, with the exception of the back. So Achilles tendon and the extensors, and then you've got this other extensor over here that is going to kind of hold everything together, and this really gives your foot that round feel that we're going to talk about next on the gesture portion. And then if we move over here to the right, you know, your lower leg muscle, Achilles tendon, huge. And then you can see what I talked about already with the ankle, where the inside is going to be like a little bit higher than the outside. And, you know, this is just really going to be something that you want to work on and roll into with that ankle. And then an abductor on the outside of that foot and an abductor on the inside is, you know, you want to be aware that that is there as well. So again, minimal anatomy goes a very long way. All right, so now let's move in and get into the guts of how you're actually going to draw the foot. The next chapter in the DVD is going to be about gesture, okay? And this is like really important. And basically what I talk about in the figure drawing DVD is this peanut shape, okay? And if you've taken my class, everyone who's taken my class understands how big I am into this peanut shape. And I say, you know, the torso is going to be the peanut. Here's my center line. Here's my rib cage. Here's my navel, here's my oblique, and here's the front of my pelvis, and everything originates from the peanut. So there are, you know, normal sized peanut shapes, and then there are really kind of skinny ones, and then you've also got like a peanut shape that would have, you know, like a box at the end. So you want to try to think of like contorting that shape, and so you really want to use it when you're drawing the foot. Okay, so now a quick little gesture for the foot would be, I'm going to roll in, I'm going to crunch in over here, I'm going to come back around to my heel, and this would be the ball of my foot right over here, this would be the arch of my foot, and then this would just be like my ankle area. Oh, I'm sorry, this would be my heel area, and now I'd have like my ankle over here, that's going to roll up, and then you got to think about this very weird shape that I'm drawing you. This is going to be almost like one of those shoe tree things that you would put inside of your shoes, like when you store them, to kind of, so their shoe keeps its kind of shape. That's what you want to draw. So now this would just be like a tendon that rolls in, and then I'm going to kind of come around, and, you know, this would just be, if the foot is going to be bent, this would be like my toes, this would be the top of my foot. But do you see how when I do that quick little gesture, this would be that tendon that we talked about that's going to hold everything together? Let's do another one. Let's do one from the front. So now, same type of thing, right from the front. Try to draw a shape of, say, like one of those shoe trees that you would put inside of your shoes to keep their shape. So now this is the top of my foot. And then we'd come to the bottom where my toes are, my big toe right over here. Metatarsal kind of pushing out. So now I've got my ankle. and that's going to kind of like roll up, and then right in the back would be my heel. Okay, so that's what I mean about doing like a quick little gesture of the foot. And so this would be that bend once again. Sometimes I roll this in if it's like a figure drawing class, just to show the viewer that this thing is wrapping around, wrapping around, wrapping around. And just with like a quick few lines, I've got like that gesture of the foot. And again, it's almost like a gesture line when you're doing a figure drawing. One more here. So it's really the top of the foot. Come on down. Let's get the ball of the foot, and then this. We're going to do this extreme arch over here, and now we're going to get the back of the heel. I'm going to do that as like a little circle. So now that would be the gesture of a foot, like a more of a profile back view. So let me kind of give you a clue here where the ankle is. So this would be ankle bone, and then tendons, big toe. Maybe I'm going to show now a little bit of underplane. Okay, so you see how I'm like really loose and sketchy with this, and everything originated from that peanut shape. And I guess my crunch now, because the peanut shape, you don't want to do, let me just kind of move back over here for the camera to see. This would be that peanut shape with no convex line, with no crunch. I know I've said this a lot to you in my classes and on the DVD, figure drawing DVD, but you got to give me like a crunch in that rolls in, that shows the viewer that it's a three-dimensional form. So, you know, now my crunch on this foot would probably be like right over here. It'd be like a fold of skin, you know, maybe this ankle would come in a little bit too. So that's another example of like a foot where you're going to get it in really, really quick. So let's just do, I think, one more, and which I think is the hardest view, which is the front view. So it's going to be like a little bit more foreshortened. So once again, this pencil, I don't have the right feel for this pencil, but I'll get it. You know, the front of your foot where your toes are is going to be like much wider. So I'm going to get that in, extreme view, almost as if we're at that same eye level. Ankle, come on up, ankle over here. And so now this would be my big toe. So just to kind of give you an idea, and then that would be the grouping of like my lower toe. So do you see how I on each one of these, I've wrapped this line around the front of my ankle? We talked about the skeleton, the bones of the foot. We talked about the minimal muscles, and I also just talked about a gesture line. So now let me spend a little bit of time now. This chapter is about the angles, but I have to admit I'm not a purist anymore with the angles. So what I'm going to do quickly for you is I'm going to do a quick like little gesture. All right, so like what we talked about with the peanut shape, roll right on in to that ankle. Okay, so that would be my gesture of that foot. That's how I would kind of handle it in class. Now I know it's very light and you can probably barely see it, but I'm really a big fan of working light to dark, and I will try not to say that too many times on this DVD. Okay, so let's get this one in now with that shape that we talked about. Okay, so that would be my gesture. Very simple. Now, let's get into the angles. So now with the angles, it's going to be, come on down with these lines. And I don't like the way that I laid it down, so I'm going to kind of fix some stuff here. So it's this angle, this one, and now you just dance down. And you do not have to go as dark as how hard I'm pressing down on my pencil. I'm just doing this for you at home so the camera can really see it. So look at all those angles on that one side of the foot. And now let's come on down this way. Tibia is going to be higher. Okay, now let's get into the heel. Okay, now these angles coming down the inside. Metatarsal kind of pushing out in that flange as well. Okay, so now let's get in the front angle for all those toes together. We can come on back after and get the individual toes. So let's say that's an angles drawing for that particular foot. So let's move on over now to this one, and let's get the heel. Let's get the bottom. And now let's get going into the ball of the foot, big toe, and now all of the toes together, little toes, and now let's just simplify this area. Two big angles for the top, so we're showing the viewer it's not flat. All right, so that is an angles drawing of these two individual feet. Now, I have to admit, like I said earlier, that I don't really use the angles in this fashion that much anymore. If I do, it's because I'm running into problems and I'm falling back on an old technique that has helped me out in the past. And when I do the angles, look how light I'm pressing down on my pencil here. I do it really lightly because I want to go over it with my organic line, and I want things to look a little bit more organic. So let's say you did press down this hard. You can still now do this continuous line. So we're going to have like a little convex that rolls in, and you can clean it up a little bit. So I'm going to have a convex line that rolls into one of those extensor tendons. All right. And now I've got a metatarsal that's bumping out on the side of my foot. This is what I was talking about earlier with the flanges, how they're really going to be pronounced on the outside of the skin. So now these toes, I can do them, since this chapter's on angles. You see how I got that big broad angle for all the toes first? Now what I'm doing is I'm coming in and I'm getting each individual toe, and I'm rolling in and I'm looking at this little negative space in between the big toe and that, let's just call it number 1 and number 2. So now I can come back and adjust with my angles. Now I'm going to go back to organic. This is where I would use one of those convex lines that's going to roll in. Okay, so that would roll in, show it that's a little bit three-dimensional. Okay, angles. Now let's just go back and clean up this foot, and let's say I'm going to come back, tendon, Achilles tendon, organic, and the more angles you put on the foot, the more complicated you make the edge, the better, I think, because I think you got to know when to go simplistic with the angles and when not to. So this would be like another convex line that we talked about. Convex meaning it rolls in. And so let's go back to the angles. Let's go back to the purest. So there's this toe, and now this little one, and then we have that flange that bumps up. We've got this little angle that rolls in, and we've got the little toe that is going to come on in, bumps up, comes in a little bit convex, and make it wrap. It's really a tendon and a vein combined. This angle, this angle, this angle. Come on into a tendon, and now the top of that bone. Okay, so now we've got another tendon, and then that foot. So you basically, the reason why I'm doing these two drawings for you is to show you the combination of the gesture that I did first, now combined with the angles, so you make your foot look a little bit more complicated on the contour, and this line that's going to wrap around that tendon that holds all the extensor tendons together, and it's just going to show that the foot is round, and I do that on every drawing. Now, I do it a lot on my short drawings. On a big drawing, you want to break the line. Not on a big drawing, on a long, more finished drawing, you want to break the line. So if you have this line really hard edge wrapping around, it's going to cut your foot off of your ankle, and you don't want to do that, but you want to just indicate it lightly. Let me just try to do like one more for you. One more profile. So maybe I'll come down like right over here. So now let's go with the gesture. So push this little arch out of the top of the foot. Very light gesture, ball of the foot. And now let's come around with the arch right into the ankle. Okay, good. So that's my gesture. All right, I did it very quickly. I know that it's very hard to get the contour and a gesture happening at the same time. So now let's go into the angles and let's be a purist. And again, I'm not into this that much anymore, but I think angles is the most overrated technique. And most of the students that I have in my class, I have to say, do not like to do the angles because it's just it's not something that's going to give you like immediate results. It's just going back to the title of the DVD, a layered approach. It's just one layer. And you have to understand that you got to master the angles layer for everything else to come together. So this angle, I'm going back to that organic line. Right over here, get this big angle going into my heel, make this turn. This is a little straighter, the back of the heel bone. Okay, perfect. Angles drawn. Now let's separate each toe, perhaps. So it's really helpful to get the outside contour and then you would separate. So I'd get that big toe now, and now maybe I'd do the separation of the little toe. And now if you have some knowledge of the flanges, you'll get the angles of each individual flange going on over there. Okay, so let's move on. Angles, make them look complicated. Before we move on, I want to show you what not to do, and I'm going to do it right over here. And I did this with my portrait drawing DVD. I showed you at home what not to do, how to draw eyes. This is how you so do not want to draw a foot. Okay, and it's a funny drawing. This is concave. Okay, everything here is very concave. Never do this on the top of the foot, ever. That's going to really show your foot being extremely primitive. So the better way to handle this kind of, I always call it a half pipe, is to do the angles, okay? Is to do the angles and bow this arch out of the top of the foot, and to understand the underlying gesture like I talked about, which is going to be that peanut shape, how this is going to roll around, arch of the foot, and then your peanut shape over here. This immediately eliminates the concave that I showed you over here. And then combined with the knowledge of that the inside ankle is going to be higher than the outside, and you're going to wrap that around. That's a great combination to get a quick foot down in a hurry. All right, let's move on to the next drawing. Planes are probably going to make me draw not too good here. It's going to be more mechanical. But first, let's lay it in. Let's lay it in with the angles. Okay, and then I always love to use the angles for all of the toes / fingers combined when we get to the hands as well. I'm going to talk about that big time. And so now our angles are going to kind of zoom on up the foot. Okay, so that would be my very quick gesture / angles drawing. So now I'm going to think about the planes. And now this lower leg, this would be my front plane, and that would be my side plane. And this is going to come on down. So now, and this extensor, believe it or not, is the plane shift, one of the extensors. And that's going to come right into my little toe. Now, this would be my convex line that's going to roll into my ankle, just so I can show you a little bit more of this foot. We won't have it be a pure, totally primitive planes drawn. So now here's my ankle. That's my line that wraps around, that I talk about over and over, that you should have in most of your drawings when you're drawing the foot. And now let's come on back down here and round some of these edges. And I'm going to try to really be a purist now with the angles of the toes. So the big thing that you want to try to remember, not so much on this foot that I'm drawing right now, is the front plane of the toes. And the front plane of the toes, I'm drawing it all together as like one big shape, is going to be really skinny. And I think it's very important that you get the front plane of the toes in. And then this big toe over here, I'm going to just make this in shadow. That is the front plane, because that toe pretty much is a cylinder. So this big toe is a cylinder. It's a cylinder and a box at the same time. I know it's hard for me to explain that. So from here, what are these lines that I'm doing right now? This is the side plane of the foot. That is the top plane. The side plane is catching shadow. The top plane is catching light. So now if I take each individual toe or flange, you are going to think of top plane, front plane, side plane. Now let's get this little guy in. Top plane, front plane, side plane. So I should shade it. I think it'll help you see it a little bit more. And it's partially cylindrical as well. Let me just separate these two. And when I'm separating the two toes, I am totally using angles. All right, so let me get this in, and let me get the angle. And there's overlap as well. So this is where the flange is really what I talked about, where you're really going to use those convexes, but this is a chapter on planes, so I don't want to talk about the convex too much. That's not necessary. So let me get in the side plane, and then I'm going to just shade it for you, and I think it'll make like a little bit more sense. So now we're going to shade this little toe a little bit more solid. Side of that cylinder, side of the plane of that other toe right there. Side plane, front plane, front plane, and now side plane, front plane, and now side plane. Okay, so you can treat, I should press down harder for you, I will at the very end. You can treat each individual toe as a box slash cylinder combined. And then if you just think that this thing's going to come down like a little bit more triangular, and now if I can just be like a little bit more solid for you at home, you'll really start to see the foot in more of like a box-like shape. Okay, now technically it's a box, but it's also cylindrical as well. I think it's important that you do both at the same time. Now let's get into just a profile foot. All right, so let's come on down now. Let's get in the angles. And let's get in the front angle of that toe, and then we're going to wrap up. And let's come on up this way. And let's get in the ankle. Heel. Okay, so those are my angles. Now let's do some planes. So this would be the back plane of that foot. And then it has a little bit of a top plane showing as well. Okay, so now I'm just going to do the side plane of that individual foot as a middle tone. So this would be like my dark. So you got to try to think of, like, especially the heel, the back of it is really going to be this. I'm going to make this like a little bit skinnier for you at home. Then my side plane, and then this toe. So top plane, side plane. And I won't get into each individual toe again for you over there. What I will do is I'm going to add some drawings on the end of this DVD as a slideshow for you, so you can kind of look at some of these very primitive type drawings. These toes, as they go back, you're really not seeing the side plane of each one of those toes because there's overlap, and this toe right over here is overlap in the side plane of that toe. So you just got to show that with that line, and that line is going to be each phalanx, each flange. So just top plane, side plane, back plane, top plane, side plane, front plane of the toes, and then it's a combination of boxes and cylinders. Let's do one more planes drawing. Again, some of this stuff, you have to understand it inside of your head. However, you want to draw in your own style. Now, with me, I was like a maniac, and I used to want to understand each technique. And for years, I would draw each technique to its completion. And then it wasn't until maybe a few years ago that all that stuff just became so ingrained in my head that it became put into my subconscious, and I just drew like in a more organic, looser way. However, I think it's imperative that you do some of these planes drawings for yourself, just because they're really important. They're really going to add to your drawings and make them look a little bit more dynamic. Once you got to try them first physically, is what I'm trying to say, before you can master them mentally. Now let's get into this foot right over here. So now let's get into the big picture, and the big picture is this would be, let's see, top plane. Okay, then the first set of flanges are going to be a top plane, front plane of the metatarsals. Now let's get in a front plane of the last two digits, we're going to call them, of the flanges. And now let's go to the big toe. And this big toe, let's just do something different. Now we can treat it as a box. This would be the box, but it's also a cylinder. So you got to think both at the same time. I know that could be like a little frustrating, and I'm not giving you a definitive answer as to is it a box or is it a cylinder. It's both. And you got to be able to see it both ways, the ball of the foot too. So now you see how I drew this line over here, and you see how I'm treating that more in like a box-like manner. However, it's kind of also round. You definitely want to be able to see both. You want to see this as a round entity, and you want to see it as a box-like form as well. So now let's just go in over here and get in the front plane of that. All right, so that's kind of cool. Now let's add like a little light and shade. So now the front, if the light's coming from the side and the top, front plane of these toes is going to be in shadow. Partially in shadow is the front plane of that toe, and this toe is cast in a shadow. This extensor tendon is actually the part from the tendon over. Let me move it over to the right. To the left. From the tendon over, that's where the plane shift really is happening. So now I can just find the line that separates the light from the dark and just shade that over. And now the separation of each toe is going to be that shadow shape. And that's kind of how I'm thinking about with the planes. And now if I wanted to, I can come on in now with the angles organically and separate each individual toe after I've done the big angles line for all of them put together. Okay, so now that's another example. This, if I wanted to, I can press down a little bit harder for you at home, but I think you get it. I think you understand where I'm going. It's just all about plane shifts. Okay, what I'm going to try to do for you in this chapter is just try to do like a 10 to 15 minute drawing of one foot and just show you how I layer all the techniques on top of each other. All right, so let's just dive into it now. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a very light gesture line of the contour of the foot. And I'm not going to press down hard on my pencil, and when I'm doing this, I'm thinking about all the things that we've already talked about, but I'm drawing in my own style. Okay, so I'm measuring, thinking about some bones, I'm thinking about some muscles. Primarily what I'm thinking about, honestly, is the angles. And I'm thinking about that a lot, but I'm not drawing the angles because I just don't want to draw them. They're going to just be too primitive for me. So now I'm going to press down a little bit harder now, and I'm going to really pay attention to the edge. So this is going to roll into a tendon. Okay, so yeah, this is going to get really light because the front plane of this foot is totally in light. So I'm going to come back. This would be tendon / bone. So that's going to bow up, like we talked about in the previous chapters, how this has like that bow to it. All right, so now we come on down to this, where that metatarsal meets that phalanx, and we're going to zoom down. And then this tendon is going to roll in. It's going to be nice and light to the top plane of that phalanx, and then we're going to zoom on down. So I'm thinking bone, and I'm thinking angles, and I'm thinking convex line all at the same time. So now I've got another phalanx, and you can see my initial lines that I put down. I'm just about going on top of them, right to the tip of that toe, and then this could come down just a little bit more, and now I've got this other tip of that toe. So it almost looks like an angles drawing, but I'm drawing, a little bit more organically. So now I'm going to just stick with the contour and get in this kind of fat pad that is surrounding the phalanx inside of that toe. And then, this is all convex. I'm not doing too many convexes yet. I just really want to get in the contour which is hard. It's a hard way to draw this way, but for some reason I've been drawing good. And when you're drawing good, and when your drawings are on and you feel comfortable, you pretty much can always get the contour in this very simplistic way without struggling. And when you're struggling, you're not drawing too good. It's hard to do it with this limited amount of line and have it look good. All right, so that's my contour drawing of this foot. Really difficult. How did I get here? I thought about the bow, thought about angles. I am doing some minimal measuring, which I haven't talked about too much on this DVD. What's right across from that toe? What's right up above this? What is right across from that? And that helps a lot. So now, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to draw in the line that separates the light from the dark. Okay, so now I'm going to come on down right into my tibia / ankle. Okay, then we kind of lose it a little bit over here. This could be a little bit higher actually. And then it's going to get like really soft and diffused, the line that separates. And then it's going to get a little bit more chiseled right over here. And this is side plane now of the foot. And so we've got where this flange meets that metatarsal right here. That's that little indent. This line that separates is wrapping around that phalanx, is what I meant to say. And then we've got the side plane of that like little toe over here. So now that's my line that separates the light from my dark. So I'm going to just take my pencil and I'm going to go with this very simplistic shading. I'm not going to press down hard with it because I don't want to go crazy with the tone just yet. But I'm going to give the viewer, you at home, an indication of the planes and an indication of where the light and shade is coming from. So now this would be like my side plane. So now I've got another plane, which is this tendon right over here. And that's going to be another very light, we're going to call it a turn-in plane. So it's going to be a little bit lighter, this turn-in plane. And let me make this side plane a little bit darker. So there's side plane, and then since this foot is round, what we talked about, this is where that tendon would be that holds the extensor tendons together. It wraps around, and you've even got some folds of his skin that wrap in that fashion, which I haven't gotten to yet. So we've got a tendon coming on down, and this one's going right into that big toe. And let's separate the toes now. So I'm going to come on in, and I'm going to pay attention to all the little angles. As I'm doing this toe, I'm looking at the whole foot. You know, you don't want to get tunnel vision, and you don't want to look just at the little minutia. You want to always look back at the whole big picture. So as soon as I get that line in, now it starts to look a little bit more like a foot, and that's going to be a cylinder. I'll put in that like little cylinder line right over there for you. Now I'm going to pay a bit more attention to the phalanx. Okay, phalanx over here, and then we're going to roll up. And now let's get in the little nail, and then we've got this phalanx. I don't like where it's positioned, but I'm going to try to stick with it so I don't change the whole drawing. It's actually not that bad. And then we're going to wrap up right into that tendon. You got to be careful. You got to keep that nice and light. And now we've got this little toe into that tendon, and then that far toe / metatarsal is really hard to see, but I'm just going to leave it like that for now. So now let's get in some really cool convexes, lines that roll in and up. So this is going to be a fold of skin, a little fold of skin over here, and that's going to add to the contour a little bit. You should see like a little bump over here, a little bump over here. I'll pay like a little bit more attention to my contour, make it a little bit more exciting looking, not so primitive. So we've got like another fold of skin that's going with the lay of the land and wrapping around. Okay, and then we've got this one wrapping around. Okay, this little bump over here is just like a little protrusion of the bone. And we've got a little fold of skin. So now I'm going to just not get stuck in one area of this foot. I'm going to move around. Press down a little bit harder so we get that 3-value system in. For those of you who've watched the portrait DVD and the figure drawing DVD, I've talked about the figure drawing DVD was really about all the different techniques. And I get into the techniques in depth. And then the portrait DVD, I don't get into the techniques as much but I do mention them. Like, I don't physically demonstrate them, and I'm probably going to demonstrate them less and less on this DVD. I'm going to really just not devote each individual chapter to say the line that separates light from the dark. I'm going to kind of do it as I'm drawing here for you. So now we've got this like little tendon over here. So it's starting to come together now. Now I'm going to switch pencils, and let's get in some like little goody details here, or maybe not so goody. All these pencils are sharpened very funny. So you're going to excuse me for a moment while I just resharpen this. Okay, now let's get into this detail. So with this nail, I'm not going to outline, okay? I'm going to indicate with a very light line, and maybe I'm going to outline this edge. I want to draw slow with my pencil. It's not about drawing fast. Just take it nice and slow, and just don't feel the need to constantly lift your pencil off of the page. That's going to cause the chicken scratch. So go over the lines that you already have and drag your hand on the paper. This I'm not digging totally, but we're just going to kind of stick with it because it's a real minutia that I don't like. That's going to go up into that tendon. Now maybe you've got, you know, this nail. Could have done like a bit of a better job on it. And then a little line over here, fold of that skin. And when you do it, don't do it straight. Have it kind of wrap around the cylinder of that toe. So now let's get in this convex line of that phalanx, and now let's get in this nail with a convex. Okay, little indication now we want to go over the edge. Cool. And we can give a little side plane tone of that toe, and that's going to show the viewer that it's semi-boxy, semi-round, and yeah, it's subtle, but it's there nonetheless. And there's like a little dark accent over here where one toe touches the other, and that's going to kind of come in and just show me like a little bit of that round stuff. Now let's get in this other toe, which I've made a tad too big. Again, I can sit here and try to make it perfect for you, but I don't think that's going to make you draw better. It'll make me feel better that I got it perfect, but it's not going to make you draw better. So let me just go with what I have and not adjust too much. And this toe is butted right up against that one, so I'm really not seeing too much of a side plane, although I'm going to cheat and I'm going to indicate it a little bit. So this should come right up, wrap around, faint phantom lines. Phantom lines, they're there, but you can barely see them. I'm going to give myself like a little phantom line over there for that joint tendon over here, and this is like really light. It's all bathed in light. So now let me come in and try to make this like a little rounder, a couple of those round lines. You don't always want to do like tone. You want to give me also some of these directional lines on top of the tone. So I'm going to get rid of that. Okay, and so this, believe it or not, this little nail has a subtle front plane to it. And that's catching a little bit of light. So now I'm going to just pay a little bit more attention now to the base of the foot and get away from the toes. And I'm going to exaggerate this dark halftone and have some of this stuff roll up. I'll smudge that. Okay, so I could now come on in and pay more attention. So let's go back to the tibia, pay more attention, give myself like a little tonal shift. Tonal shift with that. Sometimes I like to even draw the bone even though it's not showing up on the model or it's not necessarily showing up on the photo. Just actually physically draw it. And then this is too simplistic, this contour. So this is where if you have a little bit of knowledge of anatomy, you can exaggerate your drawings a little bit. So I know that heel bone's protruding out just a little bit. And so instead of just like one line that gradually goes in, so now I can make this foot a little bit more interesting with the way that it looks. And I'm going to show the viewer also here a little bit of underplane because this is rolling under. So I'm going to make it a little bit darker. This is going to be a little bit darker. So I'm going to come on in with this line, wrap around. I know it's very repetitive. This is an underplane to more tendons. This tendon actually attaches right to that metatarsal, and this one attaches to that metatarsal on the bottom. So it's just that little tonal shift. You're asking yourself in life drawing class, what is that? Well, that's just the underplane, because these tendons are cylinders. That's the underplane. So you give me that like little indication over there. And this would be the back plane of the Achilles tendon. So now let's just knock this down. Knock it down, meaning making it darker. Push this Achilles a little bit more. Okay, and now let's give that turning plane a bit more bite and make it a little bit darker. And this I'm going to make darker. I want to roll in a little bit more solid with the tone. The more solid the tone is, the more three-dimensional everything's going to look. Okay, so now I'm a little warmed up. Hopefully you can tell that I'm a little bit warmed up, because the first drawings I did, some of them were kind of rough. So now, since most of this is bathed in light, I can give, since I have some knowledge of what's going on underneath, I can give that little line for that extensor. Or I can give, you know, this little side plane of that extensor and make the front of this foot a little bit more interesting. Okay, let me just do this, and let's see, let me back away now. Let me lean away. And what else can I work on this drawing? I think I'm going to just push these side planes slightly, and then we're going to move on to one more. I think let's just push this, make this a little bit darker. And there's just all these like little doodads over here. Can't explain to you what they are. Folds of the skin. I'm going to push this round aspect just a little bit more. You want to do it without it being cutting the foot off of the lower leg. Alright, so let's move on to another drawing. I'm going to get a little bit of the lower legs in on this one. Let me start a little bit over to the... Okay, so lower leg, peanut shape, and when I draw the lower leg and the foot are so closely tied together, you just got to roll right into that ankle. And then immediately what I would do is I'd come around the ankle like that, and I'm not using any technique, I'm just drawing in my own way here, which is an organic way. Thinking about all the techniques in my mind, I'll go over them at the end. That's going to roll right into a tendon, and then we've got this to the metatarsal, right to the bottom of the foot. And then at this point now, I'm looking at the whole thing, I'm not getting too caught up. Here's my heel, and then I've got that one metatarsal that pops out into my small foot, and then for this I'm just going to do a gesture. Okay, so now I'm going to come on in here and just basically what I want to show you with this is that the top of this lower leg is going to be the top of my peanut. Okay, and where it rolls in is your tibia right over here. This is just going to kind of roll in, or it would roll in over here. So now I've got bone, metatarsal, and then let's just kind of tweak this a little bit more. Let's try to push this foot and make it a little bit more interesting looking. We've got that little phalanx into that little toe. So now this, I said I would normally do it with angles, or I'm going to do it organically. So you just got to, this is just like a little bit of measuring, and this toe is going to be like a little bit lower than that one. And then I've got like a really cool S-curve thing going on into this big toe. And this particular foot is partially upright. All the weight is on the other foot in this scene. So I'm getting this toe in right over here. So now you got to get, sometimes you got to get in that nail, just because it's going to help describe the form, because the nail wraps around the cylinder. And then there's that phalanx right over there, and you know, then we've got a nice S-curve. This is going to be a plane shift right over here, this line that I'm doing where the top of the foot meets the top of the toes. There's like a tone slash plane shift there at this simultaneously. And then I'm also going to get in this one tensed tendon that's rolling on up. For now, that's all I'm going to do with that. Let's see here. Let me just take a quick look at what I'm doing and just kind of tweak certain things here. There's a lot of convexes. gonna have this thing roll, and now I got that little bump, and then I'm just trying to pay a little bit more attention. So now let's move on to the next foot. So if I wanted to really draw these two in tandem together and make them look good together, I would look at the negative space in between both feet and which one is lower than the other. So what I'm doing now is I'm just kind of very quickly doing my very best to do a gesture, and then this is like lower than that foot. I'm doing a gesture line, I'm measuring at the same time, and let's get in this ankle, fibula, and that's going to roll up to a peanut as well, which I didn't do a great job of. So now let me come back in now and tweak this. So this is going to roll in slightly, then we've got tibia, and you can see a little bit of the side of that heel. Okay, now I gotta catch myself. Where am I? Okay, tendon, and where the metatarsal meets the phalanx, angles, and now I'm gonna go back to this gesture, simplistic line. Okay, we got the phalanx metatarsal right over here, and lots of stuff that rolls in. Remember I talked about that shoe tree type thing, which sounds funny, but if you think about that shoe tree that you store your shoes in, that shape is a very primitive gesture shape. So now let's get in this line that's going to wrap around. That's going to wrap around. We got this tendon that comes in. That's my basic shape. So now I can come on in, and let's get some toes, and let's get in the top plane of that nail/toe, and now let's get in, separate each little individual toe. So we've got this. Now let's get it. But you see how much easier it is when you don't draw each individual toe, you actually draw them on this line. They're not perfectly on this line, they're almost perfectly on this line, and right now almost is good enough. So we've got like a little side plane of that little toe, and we've got like a little side plane of that toe, number 4. Number 3, there's a little side plane, and 2, there's a little side plane, and that rolls in. That phalanx actually goes into the foot. There's like a little web in over here of like skin, and then we've got like a little side plane over here. So what I'm doing now is I'm drawing the line that separates light from the dark, and it's really faint. You can barely see it, but I'm going to put it in there anyway. And so if I want now, I can come around, wrap around, put in some tone, and maybe wrap around over here. This I want to make a little skinnier and really pay attention to the contour of that individual foot. So now this wraps into a phalanx. That's that convex line I told you about. And we've got another one over here, and I can pay a little bit more attention to the shape of that nail. All right, cool. These particular nails are painted red, so I'm matching the value, and that nail should not be dark like that. So let me just pay attention to the negative space, and I should wrap in not as darkly as what I just did right there. It's getting a little messy just because I'm drawing tiny, and I should have a sharper pencil, which I'm going to do that right now. Okay, and let's just keep moseying now with this. So let's get in this joint, we're going to call it, and that little nail, and we could wrap around slightly, widen these. You see how this foot gets wider at the tip of the foot, and then as we get to the ankle area, it gets a little bit skinnier and rounder. I mean, I would say that this view that I'm drawing you right now, this extreme front view, I think in the past when I didn't know how to draw feet yet, and I would do like this really cool figure drawing, and then it's like, oh my god, the figure drawing looks decent, and now I got to try to draw a foot, and I don't know how to draw this foot, and I don't want to ruin this drawing. And if I had this type of view where the foot looked like this, where it was kind of straight at me, foreshortened, that's when I would have like the biggest issues with drawing the foot. So if you can just get in an indication of this, what I'm doing right now, that very light sandal strap line, I call it in my class, it's going to really help with showing the viewer the dimension. And then, like I said, those key points that we talked about, key bone and muscle. So, I mean, yeah, there's like this little line over here is nice bone. And then we have some faint stuff with some of these tendons. And you can see like a round side plane of this phalanx where it touches a metatarsal. And so let me go back now and work on the other foot. So now the other foot is going to be, after I'm going to totally smudge that one. The other foot's going to be a little bit more complicated. And yeah, we're going to roll right into that. That line over here is actually the side of the metatarsal. And then, you know, this would be where the metatarsal meets that phalanx right over here. So it's pushing out. Okay, so we've got lots of convex lines happening. And I really want to kind of pick on that like little S-curve thingy that's happening, the separation of the little toe and the big toe. So now let's get in all the little individual joints. I'm going to represent that joint right there, the lower phalanx, and the upper one with that round circle. And sometimes by doing that little round circle, you're showing that joint right over there, and then a little rounder over there. I can lift this line up because that's a tonal shift. I'm going to erase that out. It's too low. And let me just come in now and separate. So I got to pay attention to what I've already put down. And let's get this in. Got a little negative space in between those, and the toes are getting wider. And again, the light's coming from the right, so I'm going to go a little shading on the left of each cylinder of the toe. And from this extensor to the left, then this foot's getting a little bit more in shadow. We got two bones right over here, beginning of the metatarsal, and then this thing is just going to be front plane, and I'm going to roll down. I'm going to put in that tone. And I think this is something that I showed you earlier. Sometimes you get like this like little line over here if that foot is bent. So I'm going to also little tonal shift, wrap around. This is a bit more complicated, so I'm going to get in this ankle, fibula, and it has a cast shadow, and it comes into the foot a little bit more. And this line that I'm showing you right now is not there, but you as the artist, you got to kind of faintly put it there. We're looking down at this foot a little bit more, so you got to think of like what I'm doing right now. Think that way with those cylinders, but not draw that way. And now let me just balance out the values. So this fibula is coming in front of the heel, so I'm going to make the heel a little bit lighter. Okay, convex, pay attention. And now maybe an accent where each toe touches the other. Just let's make this line a little bit darker. And then this front plane, even though I don't see too much tone, I'm going to cheat a little bit and put some just to break the planes. And then this is going to roll in over here. So, I mean, you see how organic, they're not the best feet I've ever drawn, but they are organic looking, and they are not, you know, that primitive type of thing where you just do like that concave line and not all these cool convexes. So now on each toe is going to have one of those extensor tendons on the top of the foot. So if you want to add a little bit more detail, I would stay away from doing the veins. You got to know what is a tendon and what is a vein. I think the veins, then you start to get into like too much. I mean, you can put it there. Basically what a vein is, it's a cylinder. And so you just got to think of where's the light coming from, and you would shade in the shadow part of the vein, and you would just like lay that on top of the foot. So let's see here. I'm going to step back from this. How am I digging this? The other thing that you want to remember, this tibia bone. It's always good to kind of get this thing in it really. I know this is not about muscles and bones, but I just want to, that just rolls right into that ankle. Same thing over here. The inside of like your lower leg is all bone, close to the ankle. So if you get that in, that's gonna be huge. And little cast shadow. I think in this DVD, it's important that I give you as many views as possible. I don't know if it's that important that I sit and do like a 50-minute rendering of a foot. So yeah, that's a very tough call for me, because I know when I did the portrait DVD, I really talked about, I really did like a 50 long 50-minute long portrait, and I think that was like highly relevant. I don't know by me doing like a 50-minute long foot if that's going to be like relevant for you. All right, so let's start now. I'm starting with the leg. You can't talk about the foot without the lower leg. So I just got in, ankle area. So now I'm going to get in. I'm going to just try to slow down a little bit over here. This is that very skinny, thin tendon that wraps around all the extensors, and it wraps around the foot right over there. And then I'm going to get in the heel bone, and the heel bone slash Achilles tendon. Okay, so this is like, see how weird and abstract that shape looks right now? It looks very odd, but that's like a gesture, and I'm really focusing on, the contour being as organic as I can. Here's another muscle that comes down from your tibia, right attaching to your heel bone. It's very faint, it's just like a very subtle tonal shift, and then we've got this Achilles tendon that's attached to your heel bone, and it's right over here as well. So those are your gorgeous convexes. And now there's a little vein on the top of that bone, and we're looking at this angle, okay? And then we let's get in this shape. See what I'm doing right over here? This is to the ball of the foot. This is huge, if you have a view like this, a back view. So I got right to the ball of the foot. It's very abstract looking. This could be my peanut, and that could be the crunch right over there. Now I'm going to get in the toe. And everything, believe it or not, I don't like to oversimplify it too much for you at home, because I really got to teach all these different techniques, but everything is a peanut shape. So if I come back and I get in that big toe phalanx and then attaching to the metatarsal, that too is another peanut shape. So I'm not going to be late. So there's my foot. I mean, I got it in like 2 minutes, and that's with talking. So it's very, very thinking angles, thinking a lot of the peanut shapes, thinking about the major muscle and bones without memorizing all of the muscles and bones. That's so not necessary. It's important, and I think if you want to be a highly figurative artist and you're going to specialize in doing realism with the figure, I think it's really crucial that you know the surface layers of the muscles and most of the bones, because then your drawings are just going to go to the next level if you do that, but not super important. So you can see I got that in, and it looks decent. And I'm not talking about like the deep tissues and all that kind of stuff, information that is not going to make your drawings improve big time. So now let's try to make this more of like a line drawing. So now let's come on down here, press down a little bit harder with our pencil, and even though the photo is very light, I'm going to add some black line. Beautiful convex that rolls in to that Achilles, and now we've got, this is very light, but you got to know that it's there. That's my heel, and that's going to roll in. This right over here now is going to be fat tissue that protects and cushions your body as you're walking. And so this I'm really focusing on all the different angles, and then we roll in. There's folds of skin, and they're going to roll in. I'm going to make this a little bit thicker. We've got like a little side plane over here, and there's a plane shift, so I can come right on in and give myself a couple of those like strategic lines that show the viewer what I'm drawing, and that's a plane shift as well. So now from here to here, from here to the left, most of the foot's going to be in shadow. But let me see what else I can do here for you. So here's a beautiful tendon that's going right to the big toe. This little line that I'm doing, I'm pressing down a little bit harder than what I would like to, is your metatarsal attached to your phalanx, and then this is your phalanx attached to your second phalanx. So convex line, and now let's get in like a little indication of the nail. Okay, that's going really far away from the viewer, so I shouldn't go black with it. I should let it fade off with a lighter line. Let's get in the side plane right over there. And I really should get a sharp pencil right now, but I'm just going to see if I can push it with this pencil. Keep this momentum going. And then we've got lots of little doodads on this foot. They're really just folds in the skin that are wrapping around. And now each individual toe, get in that bump. That's going to be the phalanx. And let's get in this individual toe without overdoing the information. And like I said earlier, that's just like a vein sitting on top of bone. You got to know what a vein is, what a tendon is, and what a bone is. So now let's kind of bring this thing home. What have I done here? I've thought about angles. Okay. I've not so much measured so much because my measurements are not dead on. If they were, I would need to bring this ankle in. Something like that, because then when I pull a line straight down, this is over to the right a little bit more. I pull that line across and I look at that negative space. I pull that line across, I pull that line across, and I look at that negative space. I look at the negative space between here and here. So I'm doing all that fun stuff. Now, if I wanted to shade this, the light's coming from the back, so from here to the left is all shadow, and then this underplane is all shadow. This is the back plane, it's catching light. This is side plane, the side of the Achilles tendon, and then this is the side plane of the tibia. So I'm thinking planes, but I'm not drawing in a box-like way. I'm just doing it with a tone, but I understand where the planes are, and I understand all those gazillion plane shifts. And then this would be my convex line, and I'll press down a little bit harder now. Like this, just make this foot pop a little bit more. And yeah, I'm going to just add that third value just to give this drawing a little bit more punch. I'm going to give you one more drawing in this foot section. All right, now let's get into the hand part of the DVD. And remember what I said earlier, it's not about memorizing every single bone in the hand, and the tendons in the forearm get extremely complicated, but I just want to point out some strategic bones that you're gonna see. And primarily what you're gonna see in the hand are these metacarpals, okay, and going down to the flanges, and you're really gonna use them the same way you would use the metatarsals on the toes to wrap those lines in. And I'm going to show you this in a slideshow at the end of this DVD, so you can take some time and look at all the words here that I've written down. But there's the carpal bones, metacarpals, and then the flanges, 3 of them. And then the bones on the forearm are really, really important. There's the radius and the ulna. And why is this so important? Because it's just, you know, like the ankle is important to the foot, well, the wrist is just as important to the hand. And, you know, this is just going to be very important that you get that ulna bone popping on out. It's really going to be the edge of the skin. And then the radius over here. It just really helps you to understand the contour of all those angles. And same thing over here. The contour of the angles of the hand are going to be where the, you know, the metacarpals meet the phalanx over there on each individual joint. So you can see how I do that. I encourage you to do this at home, just to know the basics, and then even down here just to understand how, you know, the basics of this work, and why you're getting like that little bump on the edge of the hand, why you're getting that little bump over there, and just understanding where the joints are. And let's mosey on up now to show you guys, or show you at home. Not too much with the muscles here. I'm not going to go crazy. I think the biggest muscle group that you should understand is the thumb muscles right over here, because they're really going to give the inside palm of your hand their shape. And the 3 little finger muscles. I've written down their names. Not important. What you got to just understand is that this is an oval, and that is kind of a triangular shape. And there's a spine kind of going right down the center. And the last little diagram here that I'm going to show you, once again, let's look at the ulna bone. Okay, it originates right from that elbow, comes right on down to the wrist. Gravity is usually going to pull down your forearm muscles over here. Radius, same thing, is going to really give shape to the edge of your wrist. There's a tendon that wraps around your hand the same way that tendon wraps around your foot to show that it's round. And then on the top of the hand, same as the top of the foot, it's going to be a little bit more bony, and you sometimes might see these extensor tendons that attach to each individual finger originating from the forearm muscles, that if someone pulls their hand back towards them these are going to flex. Okay, so just understand on the outside of the hand, it's all about like the knuckles, which are basically the metacarpals and the flanges, and then these extensors, and really the contour. What is it going to be? It's going to be the ulna, the radius, and the metacarpals and the flanges. So I don't want to overdo this. I will include this as, a picture on the slideshow at the end of the DVD. So let's move right in immediately to the gesture of the hand. Each hand's going to have a different gesture to it. So sometimes you're going to get you want to get the whole hand in a pure oval. Okay, and that oval is going to be attached, say, to our famous, where I'm going to go here, my famous peanut shape. So here's my forearm, and then I get all this in. So now what is that basically? If I can just kind of crank this in, this would be my thumb area. Okay, and then this would be my finger area. Let me just get this in for you, because this chapter is just about like doing gestures. So this would be all my fingers kind of drawn together as a shape like that. It's really important. I think this is like one of the most important things that I can say with the hands. It's super important, not just important, but super important that you draw all the fingers in together and then separate them, because if you try to draw each individual finger, that's just going to lead to heartache and pain. And if you just draw them in a shape of what I did right there, that's going to be so much better for you. So let me just kind of see if I can make like a little bit more sense of this drawing for you. But this hand is holding a little block cylinder. So now what do I mean by drawing the fingers together? So now I've got, this would be one finger. Okay, and now this would be a second finger, third, and then my little finger over here would be number 4. So no, they're not necessarily perfect. Like, I didn't draw them perfectly, but that's how I start the drawing. This whole hand, I see it as like an oval. Okay, and I didn't quite get this thumb in, but let me just see if I can push it a little bit more. I don't want to get into detail too much on this. I just want to show you at home. This would be those thumb muscles, that little center line. Here's my little cylinder. So if someone's holding, say, like a tool or a weapon, it's usually going to be some form of a cylinder. So I photographed the model holding a little cylinder, and so I think it's helpful to use like real world situations. And then I just come on back here. And yeah, so that's a gesture for that first one. So now let's get in another hand now. So let's start with a forearm. So I'm going to start forearm, radius into my finger. Okay, so now ulna. That's a quick gesture for a hand. Now I got to make a little bit more sense of this. Usually what I do when I draw the hand is I do the thumb second. I do the fingers in the back of the hand first. So what you want to look for is, get in this line first, that long graceful gesture, and then I would do the thumb. And this hand as well is holding a cylinder, and that you can turn that into anything that you want. It could be a weapon. This right here is like my knuckles, and that would be my forearm. So let me just come back and tweak this like a little bit more. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tweak this in the next drawing. I just want to show you a quick gesture. So let's move on now to angles. Let's go over what we already have. So I'm going to come on in here with the angles, and they're going to zoom on in, and then I'm going to originate from the interior, from that ulna, and I'm going to come on in. It's a little muscle on the side of the hand right over here, and then we've got knuckle, and I really got to pay attention to these angles. This is what's going to make it look interesting to the viewer. And now this is so important. And before I do the whole hand in the angles, this is so important that you get the angle of the knuckles. Okay, and that's going to show you a plane shift from the top plane of the hand to the plane of the fingers. And in this particular instance, the plane of the fingers are kind of making more of like a front plane. But you want to incorporate the angle of the knuckles. And I don't want to get into planes just yet because it's not the planes chapter. And maybe I'll even draw on top of this hand, but I want to give you as many hands as I possibly can. So let's just do angles for now. But that angle is one in the interior that you've got to get. So now you see I already got the big generic angle for all of my fingers together. So now you come on in and you separate each individual finger, and there's also they're kind of zooming on downward like almost like a staircase, how they come down. So now let's get this, and it's round and angular at the same time, which is an oxymoron, I know that. So now there's this joint, and that's going to roll in, and now I'm going to get the let me do it in the angles, even though it's tough for me to do that. Not tough that I don't know how, tough that I want to dive in to the organic. So now you can see how angular that is, and it's starting to look like a little bit more chiseled. So on each line always has to have at least 4 to 5 angles. So now this one straight line that I had could have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 angles, and that's going to make that look a little bit more interesting rather than just like one straight line. And let's just come back up. This is my pointer finger, and now my thumb. Remember, we do the thumb last, so this comes up to your metacarpal and flange, and then metacarpal. So it's 1, 2, 1, 2, and then I've got my carpal bones right into my radius. So you totally see the angles on that joint. And then let's just say, since we're going to be very genteel, that this person would be holding a rake and not a weapon. Okay, so now let's take this hand. And this is one of those tricky ones, and I'm going to be a purist. I'm going to do it all in the angles. So let's start with the forearm. There's the forearm. I should, give me one moment. I want to just tape this down a bit more. Good. Forearm, top of the hand, pointer finger. Okay, now let's go down. For those of you who have watched my first DVD, Figure Drawing a Later Approach, there's this wonderful technique on there that all of my students despise. But it's really the most valuable, and the students that learn to acquire a taste for it usually are really good at getting likenesses. And what is that technique called? It's called the containment system. And basically the containment system is you're containing something, i.e. fingers, with a fence, we're going to call it, or a border, or some kind of perimeter. And that's the way that you're going to get all these fingers together. So this is how I've contained the fingers. So now I'm going to separate the fingers. So this is my forearm. And so I've got like a little radius over here. I'm just trying to be pure angles. And then I've got another out dent, not an indent, but an out dent for my carpals. Carpals are right about here, my 8 carpal bones. And I've got the top plane of the hand. And then I've got where my metacarpal meets my first phalanx, and then my phalanx is just going to be these angles. And let's shoot on down. For the sake of speed, I might use fingers instead of flanges and metacarpals and all those fun words. So now what I've got here is I've got my containment system. So my fingers, if my measurements were cool and I got them on the first go round, my fingers should just fall quite nicely on that line without me having to fix too much stuff. And at the same time, I am looking at that very old-fashioned thing that we call negative space. I'm looking at the negative space in between each finger. So yes, this chapter is about the angles, but I can talk about many other things at the same time. I think I should. Now my measurements are actually going a little askew right now because I think I made that little finger too wide, but that's an easy fix. I'll fix that. So I'm looking at the negative space, and that little finger is going to fall right on there. So now I'm just going to make this little finger a little bit skinnier. Yeah, that's fine. That wasn't a dreadful mistake. And now let's just erase this out. All right, so do you guys see at home how I use the containment system to get in each individual, not to get in each individual finger, but to get in all the fingers at once. On this particular pose, you're not seeing the thumb at all. And then I came on in. I'm going to do it one more time. I'm going to make this a little bit more organic. Then I came on in and I did the angles for each individual finger. And we're not rolling in anywhere just yet, although I should, and I will on the next chapter, roll in a little bit more. But I'm just really paying attention to the contour. And some teachers, I say this a lot, some teachers really think it's bad when you do this, but this is like one of those types of things that is totally in your face. And if you can't get the contour the way that I'm getting it right now, in a halfway easy-like way, if that was a correct English sentence, but let's just say if it's not easy for you to do this, you got to really practice this. You got to practice these angles, because I'm telling you, this technique of the angles is a technique that I used for many, many, many years, and I trained myself to draw using the angles, and now I don't use them. They're all in my subconscious. I know I've said it a lot so far on this DVD, but it's super important that you master this. I think it's important that you understand the planes. However, I'm not a big fan of you drawing like this. But I want you to try a few. So the back of the hand to the knuckles, and I'll use a very common day term, knuckles, just so you understand. That's my top plane. And then the side of my hand would be obviously the side plane, but I just want to show you that this part of the hand is like a box. It's totally a block. But if you just remember it's going to the knuckles, that's going to be fine. And you just got to understand that it has a side plane, and this side plane rolls in beautifully to the side of the forearm. Okay, now let's get to the fingers. Let's get to the fun part. So now each finger is basically, most of the time, to me, they are a cylinder, but there are those times when they also look like planes. So, it's always, you're dealing with an organic creature, which is a human being, and so it's always going to be like this kind of morphed thing of planes and cylinders simultaneously, never one or the other. In rare instances, okay? But it's usually going to be a combination of the two. I hope I didn't confuse you with that. I think combination of the two planes and cylinders is the most important thing. So now let's go to this like little finger over here. So I could have made the side plane wall here a little bit taller. So as soon as I do the planes, awesome. It starts to look a little bit more three-dimensional. So the planes is the second layer or the third layer. There's gesture, there's angles, and now there's planes. And as soon as you start to add the planes with a little bit of light and shade, wow, it starts to look a tad more three-dimensional. And let's see, what do I want to talk about next here? So basically, there's a gradation in the light, and I'll revert back and talk about the first DVD just because I talked about light and shade there. And so basically where we're getting our most light is right on these knuckles where I have that line. And so this is going to gently gradate down. This is turning under that finger, so this is going to be all in shadow. So even though there's a front plane and the side plane, it does all go to shadow over there because the fingers are turned underneath, and just that part of that phalanx is catching light. Now same thing over here. The front plane of that little finger is going to start to become the same value as the side plane because it's turning under. And now let's just do this one over here. This should just gradate up. Okay, and this is not bad. It's still kind of pretty light. All right, so do you guys, I hope you understand how that works, how when the fingers go underneath, they start to really become the same value as the side plane. And then your third value would be the dark line and all the lines that roll in. If I come back to this hand now, same thing with the foot where the ankle is, right at the hand where the wrist joint is, this is going to be a lot more rounder. This is going to wrap around, even though the hand sometimes if the camera pans down to the hand down here, sometimes the hand can look really flat like this, but you still got to understand that there's a subtle bow in the hand. And this particular hand that I'm going back up to up top here, there's more of a bow, and there's a bow, it wraps around, it gets flatter at the knuckles. So now here's my knuckles. So technically the light is coming from this side, and this would be pretty much my side plane of my hand and my first pointer finger. So we're coming on down, side plane, side plane. This is a subtle cylinder. We're not seeing the side plane of that hand. And then this knuckle is like a ball. Okay, so now we're going to see like a little bit of the side plane of that knuckle. And, you know, this knuckle too could be like a ball shape. We're going to see a little bit of the side of that and then a little bit of the side of this. So the fingers, they are boxes like this hand down here. But since this hand up top, the fingers are touching each other, you just don't see it. So it's more of a subtle wrap around, wrap around, wrap around, wrap around. And this is going to be side plane rolling around. Or the begin, let's just call it the beginnings of a side plane. And all these fingers, technically, should be a little bit darker than the top of that hand. And then this is just going to wrap around, wrap around, wrap around. Let's employ all the techniques. So first thing that I'm going to do is, boy, I can go many different ways with this hand. I'm going to maybe come in this way from the thumb to the pointer finger and then wrap around. And now I'm going to use some angles. Let's see here. Make sure I get this right for you. So basically, I'm drawing all of the fingers together. Can't tell you how important that is to do. It's the easier way to draw the hand. It's not the quicker way. It's the easier way. Quicker way would just be you're on target, you can draw anything, and you just kind of go on in and you draw it. You think about all this stuff and you don't have to do these angles. That's the quicker way. But until you get there, I don't know how much time you spend drawing at home, whether it's for your leisure or you do it for work or you do it for fun. But the old adage is the more that you draw, the better you get, the quicker you draw. And so you don't have to use all these crutches, all these different techniques, because these techniques are kind of like, they're like a crutch to help you draw. So the crutch sometimes makes you walk slower, so sometimes with the technique it makes you draw slower. All right, so now let's just kind of get into this. So now that's my angles. That's my containment system. It doesn't look like much. It doesn't totally look like that hand, but now I'm going to try to fix it and try to make it a little bit more looking exactly like the hand. So I'm going to come on in here. I'm going to do my very best to do a continuous line, and I'll talk about the bones and the muscles or the planes and the angles and all that other stuff when it's relevant, but I think I just want to really, this needs to be lower. Okay, so I found my first little mistake. I'm going to raise this. The whole back of the hand needed to be higher. So let's see, I'm going to roll in now, get in that joint and little finger. And sometimes the faster I do this, now I'm basically just separating the fingers. Okay, so now I'm going to come on up. Let's stop and look and see what's right across from that. Okay, this is good. Get in this last phalanx, and now you can really see where I start to separate. And might be going a little too low right there. I'm going to do a little bit of this finger on the interior, just because I feel like I need to get some kind of interior measurements happening. It's going to wrap around. Let's wrap around with that. And now let's get in this. I'm glancing at the negative space. I've got this finger much too wide. So that means I need to adjust this one. So this particular drawing, I can tell already that my angles are not perfect. But that's okay, because your angles are like that initial road map, and your road trip is your hand drawing. And so your angles are your road map that you would have. And so sometimes when you have a map, you still can get like a little lost. You might miss a sign. Okay, so I missed a couple signs on the way, but it's starting to come together. So now, remember what I talked about way back when with the thumb muscles? And I said the little finger muscles versus the thumb muscles, and there's like that centerline spine. So right over here, this like very light line. Let's pan over to the picture. Do you see this like little tonal shift? These are your thumb muscles, and this could be a peanut shape, and those are your little finger muscles. So there's like a little spine going right down the center. And so now if we come back and we look at the drawing here, I'm going to represent that with, I got to knock the edge off of this. I'm going to represent that with a very light, faint tonal shift, and I'm going to wrap around. And now let's get in this metacarpal and angles for the phalanx. That is the tip of the thumb. Wrap around the cylinder with some of these folds of the skin. Alright, this has got to be a little wider, so that looks cool. I'm going to wrap around with a little fold of skin over there. And then we've got like folds of skin over here that are a little bit more indented. So now let's move back over to this pointer finger and pay attention to the edge. I'm going to get in that nail. And now let's pay attention to this. I'm going to wrap around. So I'm glancing at the negative space too. So this is a beautiful convex that rolls around. This is going to roll in. Now let's get this. We've got to try to make this look a little skinnier. I think the way it's going to look skinnier is by me putting in the line that separates the light from the dark, because that's what I'm doing right now. This could be plane shift, the way that I lit the hand, it's form light. So the plane shift and the light and shade shift are happening in the same spot. So that's helping my drawing. So now let's get in the nail, and the nail's going to wrap around that cylinder. Very faint. Okay, so this is going to be cast shadow from those fingers are wrapping around. Let's get in the line that separates. And most of this finger now is in shadow, with the exception of a little rim light hidden right where I'm drawing right now. There's like a little skinny rim light right there, and then there's a shape of light right there. Okay, and that's my cast shadow. So that helps. And this finger, I don't know what's going on with it, but I'm just going to leave it for now. And I talked about on the portrait DVD that you don't want to get stuck in one area of your drawing. If you feel like you're getting stuck, just keep moving. Like a Ferris wheel goes round and around. That's how you got to work on your drawings if you're getting stuck. And you just got to keep moving. So like I'm doing, like I'm just working all the techniques at once. I'm using the line that separates. I'm thinking about the planes. I'm doing the convex line. I'm thinking about what I'm drawing. Is it a box or is it a cylinder? So now this is a little trickier. Oh, I see that top of that finger. I'm destroying the light. So that's a cylinder, and that's the front plane of that top of the finger because the light's coming from up above. Okay, so that makes sense now. So let me keep moving. And this is going to roll in that little fold of skin. Fold of skin. I can get some like lines, all S curves. Tonal shift for those little finger muscles. Subtle ball shape where that metacarpal attaches to that phalanx. So it's going to be a ball shape over here. Let's go back to the wrist. And we've got our radius. And then this is very boxy, the wrist. And let me get in the line that separates on the thumb. Cool. So I'm going to come on down here, right into that finger, right into the nail. And now this is a box, like I said. Gravity's going to pull this down. That's bone. This is soft tissue muscle, and that's going to sag. Okay, now this is going to be bone, and that's a vein, and that's just going to be soft tissue. All right, cool. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to put in some shading. And this pencil is getting really dull, but I think I'm just going to do the shading in a very simplistic, generic way, up and down. And then I'm going to do my like line that's going to describe the form on top of this soft tone. And hopefully that will kind of bring it home and make everything work. Okay, so that's my side plane. Subtle tonal shifts. Remember, you got to keep your lights light, you got to keep your darks dark. And let's get in the side plane of this finger slash cylinder, because it's both to me. It's a plane. I don't know. I'm teaching you guys at home, or you at home, and I'm having issues with me saying that it's both. But it is both. It's not one or the other. It's both a cylinder and a box. So you got to think of it that way. I know that may not be the best way for me to explain it, but that's the only way that I know how to explain it. Okay, now I'm doing my last little finger here. All right, cool. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to retire that pencil. So I've got a soft, impressionistic hand going on right now, and it's working for me. I'm keeping my lights light. I have a soft tone. So now I'm going to dive into it with the line one more time, and let me trash that dark in the light. And let's just kind of make it happen now. Our last go through maybe. So I'm going to use a nice sharp line. I'm really not doing full-blown tonal renderings on this DVD. I don't think that's what is going to give you the most. I'm going to try to do my best to give you as many different hand views as I can in the time allotted to me on one DVD. So this is going to roll in, and now let's come around with that fold of skin. Technically, this finger should be the lightest outline because it is furthest away from the viewer, so it should go back into space. So I'm going to leave that. This is going to be like a little dark halftone. And now let's use darker line as we progressively come to the foreground finger. This is what I'm doing now, is just all folds of skin slash shadow shapes. Let's come back now and get in this fold of skin. All those different flanges. That's pretty much what I'm working on right now. And you know, this would be some folds of skin, top plane. I'm going to wrap around. It's very important that you wrap around, show the viewer what the viewer is looking at. You know, describe it with this line, and you know, that's what's going to give you, that's what's going to set your drawings apart from other people that are doing. I'm pro rendering and I'm pro long drawing. Heck, I've done that my whole life. But you know, if you can make it happen in like a 20 and show me as much to describe to the viewer what you're drawing with line and minimal tone, wow, that's like really cool. So that's what I'm trying to do for you now at home. And some parts of my drawing are going a little flat. I gotta just make them happen, and I gotta use the least amount of line that's gonna show the most amount of info. So I'm looking back at my negative space over here. Crucial that I get that negative space, or else I'm gonna lose the shape of this particular hand. And it's kind of like a really pretty graceful hand from a different point of view. Okay, a couple of those, and let's wrap in over here as well. We've got this thing. I think I've got this finger a little too big, but I'm gonna go with it. And now let's separate the thumb by doing a nice dark line so it comes in front of the palm of the hand. Wrap around with the nail, make it look round. Okay, cool. Now let's pay attention to the contour, make it look a little bit more exciting and interesting to look at. So I'm just doing some angles. I'm understanding now what's happening underneath the skin, and why am I doing this? Because that's, you know, first phalanx, I believe, of the thumb. So now I'm going to just kind of push this, get in some of these darks. Tonal shift, keep my lights light. Okay, let's just get in a few more. I didn't get the angles too good on that, but I'm just going to go with it. So now let's just put some really dark, heavy line on this drawing. Just let's make it pop. And this is going to be really sharp. Again, radius. It's like a total box, that wrist. And I can describe the inside of the palm of this hand with some of these lines. And let's just wrap around with some of the lines, and that's going to really... when I look at some old master's drawings, they do the tone. They do the tone on a diagonal, and then they put in these choice lines that describe the form, like what I just did over there, that round. I'm not cross-hatching. I'm not into cross-hatching at all. But, you know, you just want to give me, like what I'm doing right now, one or two few lines. So we're only going to work on this hand for another minute or two more. Let's just kind of see how much we can push it. So some of my top planes, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push, get rid of some of those lights. I think that's destroying the form. So let's do a quick little recap here. What did we do? We did first our hand gesture, and then we dove into the angles, and there's the angle of this, the angle of this angle, this angle, this angle. At the same time, we're looking at the negative space, we're measuring across, we're keeping our lights light, and we're keeping our darks dark. We're thinking about planes. At the same time, we're thinking about cylinders. And I can go on forever with this hand, and I can sit here and I can really render it out. But I think what I like to do is show you another view. All right, let's do another set of hands, and what I'm going to do for you first is I'm going to just kind of like lay them in together extremely lightly with this gesture thing that I've spoken to. And so this is how I would do it with a figure. This is how I would do it with a portrait. All right, so let's get in this forearm, and now let's get in the bottom of this forearm. And so that's my gesture. You see how I did that oval? So now what I'm going to do next is... wow, this next hand is going to be very tricky. So it's actually good that it's tricky. So I'm really going to get in the containment system. However, I'm doing the containment system organically, and I'm looking at the negative space between the two hands, like, and the two forearms, like right over here. So let me come back now and just focus in on this one hand, and let's just focus in on the edge. This is going to be more of like a line drawing with minimal shading, because it's going to take me a while to get in the proportions correct. And these are pretty tough hands to draw, I believe, if you had to draw these in the classroom setting. So I'm getting the skinniness of my wrist, and gravity now is going to pull this down. There's all these different angles and all those different veins. So gravity is going to totally pull down this fingers, the muscles of the little fingers, I should say. You see how I've already got in this? I'm going to just get it in now like a little bit more in detail, or just pay like a little bit more attention to highs and lows of measurements. And I'm working this whole hand at once. I'm not getting into details just yet, and it may not be perfect, but I want to just keep going. And you know, this is just a pure cylinder. Sometimes it's helpful, I've made that too long. Sometimes it's helpful when you get in that little oval. And yeah, let's get this in. And let's get that finger in. You see how loose I am with this? And it's just a quick way to start. And all right, so now I've got the back of my hand in. Let's get in the thumb muscles. And let's just get in there. Okay, so I'm going to leave that. This is not working for me right now, but I'll fix it. So now let's go do this complete. Normally I say what I usually do is I leave the thumb out and I do the thumb last. But since this is a profile, I'm going to put the thumb in first, because it's really huge in this drawing. So I'm going very lightly, and the reason why I'm going very lightly is you avoid altogether having to ever use your eraser. I got to make sure that these hands are in proportion together. I want them to look the same. All right, so now what I'm going to do is get in Look at the negative space from this fingertip to the bottom of that hand. Okay, cool. And I'm going to now look at the negative space between the individual fingers. This is such a weird thing, how this finger is touching the forearm like that. It's just so weird that that is happening, but it is. And then I've got more negative space. Okay, so let's keep moseying. It's not perfect. Angles. Now let's get in the angles. And you see this line that I had? Technically, I wanted that on the fingertips. It didn't quite work that way, but that's cool. So now I'm going to combine more of the purest angles. Look at the negative space from the thumb to the tip of that finger. Very important. And let's get in this joint, and now let's get the angle of this finger in. Now you step back and you look at it, and technically what I should be doing is pulling up. I'm not getting into that minutia, but that's what I should be doing. If this was like a 2-hour-long drawing, I'd be doing more of that measuring. So this, you got to look right through that finger. This pulls through to that knuckle, and now you look at the negative space from, or just the distance, not negative space, the distance from here to here. And those are those extensor tendons that are all going on. And we'll come back. There's a vein, and that's my radius. I'm sorry, ulna. There's a vein over here. And I'm looking at that negative space. Okay, so that's my first go through, and it's very light. The only place I'm going dark is on this wrist because it just looked easier to draw for me. So now let's tweak more. And I'm going to do the angles in my mind, and I'm going to really take it nice and slow and pay attention. So there's that phalanx joint, and then we've got this one, this beautiful S-curve line that is wrapping around the thumb muscles. And now this is going to roll in, and at the same time, I'm going to get the line that separates, and it's bouncing all over the place. It's very complicated right now just because the fingers are extremely complicated. But if you think of them as just plain cylinders or plain boxes, it makes it easier. So I'm just going to get in that shape, because I draw better with shape and tone. So I got that in, and that helps to describe the form. All right, this could bow up a tad more. I can pay a little bit more attention to that. That looks a little nicer to me, more like that individual thumb. So now I'm going to get in this little fold of skin, because that fold of skin is going to be used as a measuring tool. And now I'm going to get in this one, which is a little thicker. And so we've got that little doodad outcropping, like I said earlier, little finger muscles, gravity. And then we've got some good stuff happening here with the wrist. Bow that out. Okay, now I'll step back from it. How does it look? How does it look? So let's just keep going. Doesn't look terrible. And let's get in this finger. And I'm looking at the distance from here to here, which is cool. So I'm going back now. I'm reverting back to the old-fashioned, non-sexy technique of just plain Jane measuring, okay, and looking at negative space. I think it's really important. That's how I draw something very complicated like this. So I'm looking, and this is going to be a little bit higher. Pretty soon I should change my pencils, because this pencil is starting to go a little dull on me, but I'm going to stick with it. So you just got to think, this thing is foreshortened, this finger. And I haven't talking to, foreshortening enough. I guess the short way, no pun intended, but the short way to deal with foreshortening for now is to use the negative space right over here and to measure. And that's going to help with the foreshortening. There's this very funny name for a foreshortening technique that I use, and it's a Pac-Man. Your foreshortened shapes look like Pac-Man. Like right over here, this would be like a Pac-Man shape. I'm not going to get into it too much, but this is a cylinder, that finger, and it's coming right at us, and there's overlap. So yes, you have a circle. That's your front plane. Then you have a Pac-Man shape, and then you have another little Pac-Man shape for that. And then you combine the Pac-Man shape with the negative space, and the measuring, and that's how you're going to get that thing foreshortened. I hope that made sense to you. I know I didn't really. In my classroom, I get into that big time. I got to just watch my time here on this DVD. So now, fingertip's going to be like a little bit skinnier. And then we're going to roll in. We've got that joint, that phalanx. And try to make it a little expressive. This thing's going to wrap around. Okay, there's that whole wrap around to that. And now let's get in the line that separates. Okay, awesome. So let's pay a little bit more attention to the contour and get in this without breaking the finger in half in terms of linear breaking it in half. Let's get in that tone. And let's get in this tone. Okay, this is very complicated in terms of like finding a line that separates the light from the dark. So I'm just going to make one up subtly. It's there, but I'm making it ultra obvious. So here's this line is the cast shadow from that finger on the palm of the hand. And so I see what's off big time. Let me see if I can fix this. I'm going to raise this. And my line that separates is in the middle of the front of that cylinder of that finger. And then this one right over here, cast shadow. And yeah. And all of this. All cast shadow. Veins. Radius. An indent. Side plane. This is a cylinder. This is a cylinder that form. It's a box over there. So it's getting a little messy over there. I mean, what I'd have to do is go back into the top planes and erase out. Like, this is how it should look, nice and clean like that. But I've smudged it, and this pencil is highly smudgeable. So let me just see if I can clean it up slightly, and then I'm going to move over to the other hand. And I'm just going to get in this nail. The nail's going to wrap around. Sometimes the less information you put in with the nails, the better. The more information, especially outlines. Talked about a lot about outlines in the portrait DVD when I'm drawing eyes, nose, and lips. And outlines are the kiss of death. You don't want to outline much. I'm pro line, but not pro outline, where you put a line around everything. So that's how, you know, I would frame out that first hand. Now let's move on down. Now I'm going to switch pencils, get a sharper pencil. And I'm going to just point out a couple like little things here with this finger. You got to sometimes, like the fingertips, you just got to do that like little loop up. They might look like a pure straight thing, but they're not straight. This thing's got like loop a little bit. That's going to make it look a little bit more graceful and skinnier. It's got to get skinnier at the tip. So now let's come on down over here to that knuckle. Good. And now let's get that ball of the finger right over there. We've got a whole bunch of things. Here to here is looking borderline thick, but do you see when I just did that? It made it look so much more graceful. So now I got the angle wrong over here. I got to fix this. So I'm going to fix it right now, and then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do that little indent. That's going to make that finger look a whole lot graceful. And technically, this finger should be lighter than the thumb. So I'm not going to do any shading. Because I want that finger to go behind the thumb and get that little finger too. So now let's do the thumb. Okay, so we've got wrap around at the joint. Okay, this is going to be physically that bone of that flange. And then we've got some muscle and soft tissue wrapping right in as well, wrapping around. Come around that thumb muscle with a couple of lines describing the form. And I'm going to go thicker now with this, thicker and darker, even though it's a top plane. And I usually tell my students to go thicker and darker on the underplane. But, you know, this is an exception because I want this thumb to come forward. So let's make this skinnier, really pay attention. This is an accent where that thumb is touching the base of the hand. Okay, cool. So now from this joint right over here where that phalanx touches that metacarpal, that's where there's going to be a plane shift, and that's where I'm going to start to shade, and a little bit over here and a little bit on the underplane of that thumb. So with a nail at home, I haven't talked too much about fingernails, but fingernails, you just don't want to use black anywhere. You don't want to, if you're drawing a light-skinned hand, just keep it minimal. Do not outline with a really hard edge line. You're going to destroy your form. And for now, I'm less is best, just because of the time restraints on this DVD. All right. And And let me get in that finger. I could look at this negative space right over here. That's like kind of cool. And I'm going to put in like a little tone. That's the underplane of that finger. Press down harder with the line of that thumb. Make it come forward even still. Negative space. And now this is cast shadow from that one finger onto this finger. Okay, that's working for me, so I'm going to leave it. So we've got like a little bump up, indent. And let's get in this knuckle. And it's going to the extensors, which are two of them right over there. Sometimes you get like a little egg-shaped thing happening. It's like a muscle as well. Right in here, that part of the hand. And from that down, it's going to be all shadow. Let me get in this knuckle of this finger. And there's that vein, and then pay attention to the angles so it doesn't look primitive. Okay, so now let's just kind of crank out this finger. That's going to roll in. We've got that little joint. Bump up. Skinnier on that fingertip. Come on in. Wrap around. Okay, and now let's just kind of get some shading now. So, from here down, find the line that separates. I'm going with the direction of the back of the hand, and I extended the shading too much. Sorry. Okay, getting ahead of myself here. So this is just wrapping into the underplane of the wrist. Right over here. So you can see how I'm laying this all out. Now, what I've mentioned on my previous DVDs and in my classes, your drawings, it's all about how much time you have to spend on your drawings. And so if you're going into, say, a 20-minute drawing, well, then you're just going to do line with minimal shading. If you're going to do a 6-hour drawing and it's going to be tonal, well, then you take your time with it in the beginning and you work extremely light to dark. And you always want to go into each drawing with like an outcome. So there are times when I go and I work with a model and I say, all right, today is about me working on 20-minute gesture drawings on newsprint with a China marker. And that's all I'll do. And that really works on my eye-hand coordination. And I just want to get quick drawings down. And then there'll be another time where I work with a model and I'll do like a 6-hour or perhaps a 12-hour drawing. I'll use, maybe a mechanical pencil with an HB lead, and I'll use really good paper. So basically what I'm trying to explain to you guys, or you at home, is that go into each drawing with an outcome so you don't get disappointed if it doesn't come out the way that you wanted it to. So it's all about time and the amount of time that you have to work on the hand. That's the most important thing that I can tell you. So let's just kind of gel these two together so they look like they were done by the same person. And the reason why I say that is because I just want to go with the same direction with my tone. And yeah, let's do this. Let's just kind of keep going. And I want to just briefly talk about the forearm before I finish this off. Okay, so forearms, just to reiterate, if I'm going to go back, gravity, just a peanut shape, and the wrist is always going to be a box. So this is my underplane, and then this is just going to be my peanut shape. Okay, so let me I don't like the way that this looks. I want to fix it, and then we're going to stop this drawing, and I'm going to recap it very quickly before I stop it. And let me just push this a couple more folds in here, make it look a little bit more interesting. I think I've overworked this hand a little bit. All right, so now I think this hand is the trickiest one. So what I was thinking about big time is the angles, containment system, not drawing the fingers individually. So you outline them, and then you you contain them, then you look at the negative space, then you pull the lines across, looking at the negative space over here, always wrapping in, not just doing a finger with no lines that wrap in, thinking about the light and the shade, finding the line that separates, a couple of these strategic lines like I'm doing like right now that will layer on top of the tone that just show the viewer what the form is made out of. Okay, so yeah, angles, negative space, gesture, light and shade, bones and muscles. So the first thing is this forearm shape. Now I know that I've mentioned it, that it's a peanut shape with a box on the end and all that jazz, but I wanted to physically draw it for you. So this is how I would perceive the box. Forearm's going to be something like that. It's very boxy, and then this part of the forearm becomes extremely cylindrical. Okay, so usually this is the bone that you really got to cling on to, right from the elbow, coming on right on down to the wrist. Let me raise this, the ulna. And if you can just remember that that's going to come kind of somewhat straight, and gravity is going to pull down that forearm, and that this is a box, wow, that's going to help you tremendously. So now I'm just going to continue with this box thing, kind of. This is what I wanted to point out to you like a little bit more. Do you see this pivot of the knuckles? So you want to think of this as being like round, those knuckles, not a straight line all the time. So now let me just come on back in. Gravity's going to pull down those little finger muscles, and there's really no line that separates the light from the dark on this. It's just mainly front light. But this is the side plane of the box of the back of the hand. So you've got this pivot, you've got the box of the back of the hand, and you've got the box of the wrist. Okay, now the next thing, and I leave the thumb out. Notice how I do that. That is so important because the thumb can get extremely confusing. Thumb has just got one of those really confusing personalities that we don't like to talk about. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for the pivot of my fingertips. So you see how I'm doing that, how I'm wrapping it around. It's angles and this generic pivot shape at the same time. And now let's do it for this joint. It's same thing. It's pivoting around. And I think about that all the time. So I'm using a combination of all these different techniques. So now let me just kind of come on in a little bit more. Your next step would be, you could either A, draw each individual finger, and there's also like one more phalanx joint that I can put on in there. Let me get in just a couple things here before I get into that minutia. All right, so I'm just getting in that little finger. Fingers are going to originate from a little bit more inside of the hand. And let's see, 1, 2, how many fingers we got here, Matt? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, good. So, and this is like webbing right over here on your hands. Sounds silly, but that's what it is, because your joint is more in the back of your hand where your metacarpal and your first phalanx kind of meet. So I'm getting that finger in, and now let's get these two angles. Looking at the negative space at the same time. I'm thinking about the bones. Okay, so that's working for me. So let me just kind of get in the edge a little bit better, or the contour, I should say. And yeah. Okay, so up to this joint. Now, gravity, and wrap in. And let's get in the last phalanx over here. It's going to be a little bit of a flatter finger. Cool. That's going to wrap into that joint. Come in, come out, come in, thinking of the angles. All right, very nice. And now we're going to just wrap around. Now let's make this finger a little bit thicker because it's too skinny. And let's just, I'm thinking about the different individual joints. Okay, I'll lean back. There's a little side plane over here indicated by a skinny tone. I made that negative space too small, but that's okay. As long as I understand that I did it, and I understand what is wrong with it if I wanted it to be exact. Technically, this little finger, I've made it too long. So I'll just adjust everything. All right, cool. So now let's go back. And work on the knuckles. All right, and there's a little side plane on this. And then from this joint down, that's all in shadow. From here down, that's all in shadow. This, we just have like a little doodad of the side of that phalanx. Couple of lines that wrap in, a little bit of a shadow, a little side of that phalanx over there. And then this is just skinny, because this is primarily in light. Getting like a little tonal shift, and now from it becomes a little bit more boxy over here. This is all shadow. Cool. Shadow, side plane shadow from that joint down, that's all shadow. This is kind of pretty much all in shadow. And this is just side plane shadow. Now with the nail, I'm going to just slightly indicate it. See that simple little line? Done. No outline. Simple little line. And simple little line over there. And this one I can barely see, it's in the shadow. Okay, so now let's zoom on up. And get in some veins, a couple of folds, and now we're going to do the thumb. So this hand is on its hips, so we got that little joint, and I'm looking at the distance from here to here. I made that too wide, and we've got this little thumb muscle that I talked about before. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, just last go around with this drawing, just sharpen some stuff. Okay, so now let's just come on in with our sharp line and give myself some interior stuff so it's not just done on the exterior. And yeah. And just let's accentuate the flanges. That's going to give the contour its look and feel that they're fingers and not cigars. Okay, so side plane and a couple more little details, and then we're going to kind of end this thing. A little tone over here for some reason. Okay, so pivot. The pivot is huge. It's huge. Box over here. Thumb last. I'd like to thank you for purchasing the DVD. If you want to find out details on any other of my products, you can visit my website at mattsillustration.com, or perhaps you want to find out about a class that I offer at SVA. That's on the website as well. Thank you again.